everybody, it's Leisha from Caught by Design. Today I'm going to show you how to use the new Artesprix Iron-On-Ink Sublimation acrylic paints. That's right, you can now sublimate with paint. And so for this project, I am going to create a camouflage pattern to use on a metal bottle opener. I think it's a great project for, say, Father's Day or a man's birthday. And I think it's going to be fun. So let's get started. First, I have traced my blank onto a piece of cardstock. Now with sublimation markers and stamp pads from Artesprix, you can use any kind of paper, but I find that a thicker paper such as cardstock or a mixed media paper works better for the paints. You don't have as much bleed through, and also the paint's kind of thicker, and so you don't have quite as much curling if you'll use a thicker paper like this. I'm going to use this bottle opener from Artesprix, and it's a brushed metal, and I think it's going to turn out really nicely. So I've just traced that blank with a pencil. You could use a pen or a fine line Sharpie marker, but I like to use a pencil because I just have more luck with pencil. Now, actually, as we paint this is going to get covered up. So really, I'm just using it as a sizing, but it's just my practice to go ahead. Whoops, I forgot to trace the circle down there. It's just my practice to trace the entire blank. So if I'm doing a certain kind of design that I don't want to fall within the holes, I know where they are. But for this one, the camouflage pattern, it's not going to matter. But I've just gone ahead and traced the whole thing. The Artesprix acrylic paints come in 3 primary colors: blue, red, yellow, and then also black. So you can use these basic colors to mix any shade that you want. There is also a white lightening medium that you can mix with the colors to lighten them or to soften the colors. And the reason it's called a lightening medium rather than a paint is because white does not sublimate, even in paint. So this can only be used as a mixative to get the shade that you want. Now, these colors are super strong. So if you were to paint a dark color and then put maybe the white on top of it, or even just a light shade of another color over a dark color, those dark colors are going to bleed through. So you need to keep that in mind. Now we're going to use a more traditional camo color of, we're kind of going to put a tan on the back, and then put a couple different shades of green, and then a darker brown on it. Camo comes in a multitude of colors. If you look at any kind of camo patterns, it can be in pastels, brights, darks, lights, school colors, just whatever you like. So online, on the Artesprix site, you can download this color mixing chart. So we are going to start with a brown and then lighten it up to create the tan. Use some of this lime green and some of this darker green, and then take that brown and darken it a bit to do our last accent color. Most of the camo you see will have, 4 colors or so, or it could even be monochromatic. I've seen some done in all different shades of like blue or brown or green. Sky's the limit. You get to be the designer. So I've got a styrofoam plate here. I've got my paints, I've got a little bit of water, I've got my paint brushes and some paper toweling, and we are going to just get started by mixing. Now I want to start with my brown, and I want to create a very light shade of tan to go as my background. And the reason I want it to be pretty light is because it's you know, if I make it dark, like I said, it's going to bleed through to those other colors. So we want to go as light as possible and still have some color to it. So the brown says that it is 1 part purple, 1 part yellow. That means we've got to start with our purple. And our purple is 1 part blue and 1 part red. This whole mixing chart shows you in parts. Like even the red paint, you don't want to use straight out of the bottle to get a true red, because a true red has got 10 parts of red, 1 part of brown. So you just start with this chart right here and then adjust it to your liking. One thing you have to learn about the sublimation paints is they are not going to look on the paper, or even when you mix them up, exactly like they're going to look when they're sublimated. Just like the markers, just like the stamp pads, just like a traditional sublimation print, the colors are usually quite a bit duller than what they will actually sublimate. So you have to learn to trust the color chart, or you could make a color chart of your own. You could do some mixing, kind of keep notes on the ratios that you're using, and then sublimate them and see how they turn out. Just keep in mind that colors are going to sublimate differently on different types of blanks. So if you're sublimating, say, on a metal blank like we're going to do today, you'll get maybe more of a washed look, whereas and you're also going to have that metal background, so it's going to look different than it would on, say, a shirt or a white hardboard coaster or a metal bookmark or bag tag, you know, plastic bag tag, whatever. Just keep in mind that colors can vary slightly depending on your blank. So let's start out and create our blue, which is our purple, which is the 1 part blue and 1 part red. These paints go a long way, so you don't need a lot, but when you're mixing them, do go ahead and mix a little bit more than you think you're going to need, because you don't want to have to come back and mix again and try to match a shade. So the brown is what we're going to be using a lot of, so I'm going to use a little bit more of that than I will with the greens. And you'll see that I'm kind of using this. I've had my paint splatter a little bit when I close it, and I don't want it to go everywhere, so I'm trying to be just a little bit careful with it. You can use a wipe, you can use a paper towel. Now the paints are water-based, and so they wash up very nicely, and then when you apply heat, that's when they get set. But I'm just trying to be a little, you know, neater than I usually am. Actually, I'm a pretty messy crafter. So I've got my blue and my red here. I'm going to mix those together and create my purple. Now I'm just using some brushes that I got at the craft store. This one's kind of it says it's I don't know, it's a round brush. It has a 6 on it. That's probably a size. Like I said, I'm not a painter, I'm not an artist. But this one is kind of good for mixing. So I'm going to mix this blue and this red together. You can use palette paper. You could use freezer paper to mix on. You could use a little plastic palette, whatever. I'm just using this styrofoam plate and trying to get all of that really mixed together. And even if you were to squeeze out the black straight away, it would look kind of purpley. That's what I said. You've got to learn to trust the chart and trust what it is telling you. So this purple right here, if we were to use it just like it is, my guess is that it would sublimate a very nice, dark, rich purple, even though it looks a little lighter. Okay, so I've got some purple there, and then again my brown says it's 1 part purple and 1 part yellow. So I used some decent sized drops for that purple of blue and red. So let's put our yellow in there. That's probably about right. We'll mix it up. Oh, so it's becoming a little bit more brown. Now, if you don't like it, you can mix a little more yellow in it or whatever. But like I said, just remember that you need to trust the color chart. I'll show you what I mean because, okay, so this, you know, if you were mixing it up and say, oh, that looks really purple, that does not look brown. Well, I'm going to squeeze out some black so you can see what black looks like. So this right here is black. And you see how that looks kind of purple or grayish purple? So it sublimates differently. Now, from this brown, I'm going to go both darker and lighter. Lighter for my shade of tan that I want on the background, and then I'm going to add in just a little bit of black for the final accent color I'm going to use. Now, I want this to be pretty light, so I'm going to mix in quite a bit of this lightening medium, like that's probably a little bit more than 10 drops or so, but I want it super light. Even go just a little bit lighter. I have found that the paint kind of darkens up as it dries even. So I want this to be pretty light. Okay, I like that, but I think I'm going to put just a tad more yellow in it. I may regret this. We'll see. I don't want it to be green. Just to give it a little bit more brown tone in there. I want to try to get all that mixed in because I don't want funky little colors coming. Like I said, I'm mixing up quite a bit of this because I'm going, it's the color I'll probably use the most of. Normally you would not need this much paint. And try to get it all mixed in there so that we don't have any like streaks. And believe me, if I can do this, you can do this, because I'm good with computer-generated art and graphics and things like that, but when it comes to actually painting or drawing, that is not my skill set. Okay, so I've got that mixed up pretty well. And this This round brush I'm really using more just for mixing than painting. You could even use a craft stick. Just whatever you like. I'm just trying to get it all mixed in there really well. Okay, now I'm going to take my blank here, my traced blank, and for this one I'm going to use a little bit bigger brush because I'm going over all of this. And not going on super heavy. If you want a real heavy coverage, I would suggest that you put down one coat and then let it dry and then put down another coat. And you'll see this is going to cover up my pencil marks, just like I told you. We're not going to be able to see through that, but I'm just going to pass the edge, and that way I know when I lay my blank down, I'll have plenty of room to adjust it a little bit and not have any blank space on the sides. So that's really, it was just more of a guide. Not going super heavy, but trying to get some good coverage here. I like this because you don't have to be super exact with this part of it. And also, the thicker you put it on, the more that your, paper is likely to buckle. So that's another reason for not putting it on super thick. It just kind of depends on what you're going for. Now, do you see that? You see how I told you it dries a little darker? See, this is already dried and how that looks lighter, but it'll match up in just a minute. I want this to be relatively light, relatively thin, because I don't want it to bleed through too much. And if you don't like the brush strokes, you can go ahead and go over it again. Just like I said, the more paint you put on, the more likely it is going to be to bleed through. If you wanted a watercolor look, which I think this one may end up kind of with a little bit of a watercolor washed look because of the brushed metal blank, but you can even mix these paints with water and get some really nice effects. We did some coasters at NAMTA, the trade show I just went to recently where the paints were introduced. We did some coasters where we just mixed the paints with a little bit of water and did kind of a washed look. You could even do that if you have paint left over that you don't want to waste, because I wouldn't try to save it. There's not enough on here really to save, and then how are you going to save that it doesn't just dry up and be useless? But you could always take and mix some of these with some water, do some washes, just do some different backgrounds or whatever, and save them and sublimate them later. That's what's really cool about this. I've done my tie-dye where I've done a whole bunch at one time and then sublimated them later, and they do very, very well. Just with the paint especially, I would, if I was going to save these, I would probably stack them together with maybe some protective paper in between them. That way they don't get damaged while while they're in storage. And then also make sure that they're super dry before you stack them anywhere. Now, I went ahead and put 2 coats on this. We'll see. I did one earlier just as a tester, and I only did 1 coat, and I liked it. It had kind of a washed look, but even that one, the colors bled through with 1 coat. So I don't want this brown to bleed through. I want my greens and stuff to show, but I also want some good coverage. So we'll see. We'll see how this one turns out. Now you can let these air dry, or you can speed up the drying just a little bit with a heat gun. I'm going to do that, so just in the interest of time. That way when we put the green on top of it, we won't get very much smearing or smudging. And it does buckle the paper a little bit, but don't be too concerned about that, because when we tape it down to the blank, we're gonna tape it down nice and flat. Okay, I've got that pretty dry, and I'm gonna let it dry even a little bit more while I mix up my green. So I'm gonna start out with the lime, which is 10 parts yellow, 1 part blue. Don't need a lot of this, so I'm going to use small drops when I go to mix it. So let me just get that brush. Cleaned off there. And I will take and wash these brushes later with just water, but for now I'm just going to rinse them a little bit. Okay, so we're lime green, 10 parts yellow, 1 part blue. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. And let's do our 10 parts yellow and our 1 part blue. And I'm just going to take this little round brush and mix these together. Now, camo is basically just some irregular shapes. And some of them are touching, and some of them aren't. And you can just have fun with it. So now that we've got our green mixed up, we're just going to start by making some irregular shapes. Most of them I'll have at the edges. I might put some in the middle, but it's just really real free form. Nothing that is overly complicated, and I tend to overthink it. So my best advice to you is don't overthink it. Just have fun with it. Okay, so I've got my lime green in there. I'm going to heat it with the heat gun to speed up the drying again, and then I'm going to go over it one more time just to get some really good coverage, because this lime green is kind of a light color, and even the tan tends to bleed through a little bit. So you can see as I dry it how you can see that area in there where it would have bled through. So that's another good reason for letting it dry really well. So I'm just going to go over all of these again and dry them again with the heat gun and touch up any places that I think need touching up before I add the next color. Okay, now we can mix up our dark green, which is 1 part yellow and 1 part blue. And I'm just going to go around those those lime green areas and just start adding in some of the darker green. I'll do the same thing. I'll add it in. I will dry it some with the heat gun and probably go back and do a second coat. Although this darker green might be less prone to bleed through. Okay, I've got my greens done. I'm gonna dry them just a little bit more. And I'm just going to add a touch of black to my dark brown, just to give it a little more depth. So I'll take this one, mix that in, and then I'm just going to take my brush and kind of fill in with some of this dark brownish black, blackish brown. Okay, I've got it all painted. So I have dried it with the heat gun, but I'm going to let it dry a little bit more while I go and wash my hands and clean up my paint, and then we'll be ready to make our sublimation sandwich and press it. Okay, I think our transfer is really good and dry now, and I've got a few things cleaned up. These bottle openers can be sublimated on either side. In fact, you could sublimate both sides at once if you had a design that you wanted to do that with. I'm going to just wipe it off just a little bit, just to get rid of any dust or dirt. And then I'm going to put it on here. And like I said earlier, it's not really going to matter where this goes. I just wanted to make sure that I had enough coverage. Since this has a little bit more bleed through, I'm going to move this down just a little bit. In fact, I think I'll turn it around since that's more of a hole. Just adjust it however you like it. Let's go with this. I'm going to tape this down pretty well. I'm using my Artesprix heat resistant tape. And I think I'll put a piece across there. And actually there and there maybe. Just want some really good adhesion. Let's see if that's with the paint, the paper tends to buckle a little bit, so I want to get this as smooth as possible. I think I'll go back and tape it this way instead. And maybe I'll just go ahead and put a piece on the end. You can reuse your tape as long as it doesn't have any sublimation ink on it, but I usually get, the way I tape mine, I usually get a lot of ink on it, so I don't reuse it, but it can be reused. Now we will make our sublimation sandwich. You need a piece of protective paper for the top and the bottom that's larger than the blank and the transfer. I usually just cut one piece and fold it in half. Now when you go to press it, you're going to want the transfer side on the top facing down so that it's going right into your blank. You want the heat to only have to go through the paper. If it had to go through the blank, it wouldn't work. So we want it to only go through the paper. And so I've got that protective paper on the bottom, the Artesprix siliconized protective paper, transfer, blank with the transfer side up, whatever side I want to transfer on. The bottle openers, it doesn't matter, but if you had something that you could only sublimate onto one side, you'd want that side that you're going to sublimate on to facing up, your transfer facing down, and another piece of protective paper on the top. I'm going to go over to the heat press and press this for 75 seconds at 400 degrees. And then I'm going to come back over with it, and I'm going to put it on this heat protective mat to do my little peak test. It's going to be really hot, and so therefore if I need to press it again for some reason, I can just pick it up and take it back. So let me run over to the heat press, do the pressing, and I'll be right back. I did a peak test over at the heat press. I've got on some protective gloves, And I'll show you what I did. I just lifted a corner up to make sure that the design had transferred like I wanted it. And since I saw that it had transferred, I went ahead and took it off the press. Had it not been like I wanted to, or for some reason, if I had accidentally pressed on the wrong side, you know, had the blank side up, I would just press it again. So I don't want it to shift. I'm trying to let it cool, but that's why I have it on this protective mat so that it doesn't go through to my surface here. And it is pretty hot. Let's see. Let's just lift this up. And how about that? Maybe kind of hard to see on the dark background here, but that looks really good to me. I like how that turned out. I think it'll make a great gift, great Father's Day gift, birthday gift, whatever. And sometimes it's hard to find things with the stamp pads and the inks that I think are good for men, for a male design, but this camo would be great. Camo is really popular around where I live. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this project. I hope you'll give the acrylic sublimation paints from Artesprix a try, and let me know how you like them. Let me know if you have any tips you want to share with me. If you like this video, please hit like below and subscribe to my channel. And as always, thanks for watching and have a great day.